Today we're going to talk about hip extension. More specifically, how to strengthen the muscles that extend the hip, or in other words, move this bone, our femur bone, backwards. You are going to learn why these muscles are important to strengthen, how to identify if maybe you have some weakness in your hip extensors, and of course, exercises on how to strengthen or improve the movement quality of the muscles that move the leg backwards. If you're new to this channel, I'm Tara, I'm a neurologic physical therapist, and on this channel we talk about anything and everything related to mobility, health, fitness, and mindset in the context of neurologic injury, with the end goal of empowering you with as many tools as possible to take ownership of your rehab and your health to live an overall more active, more mobile, pain-free, happier, healthier life. With all that said, let's talk about everything that's important about the hip extensors as it relates to movement efficiency. So in order to do that, let's just first talk about why the hip extensors are so important. Well, one is, and it's a video I did quite a while ago, but I talked about this concept of the posterior kinetic chain. So in a nutshell, I will link that video below. So if you didn't see that video, I highly recommend that you watch that video before you watch this one. But briefly, we have these kinetic chains, which are links of muscles that offer what we call dynamic stability, meaning they help to stabilize all of our little tiny bones when we're in motion. And the posterior kinetic chain is the chain that is the most talked about, or I would say probably the most important when it comes to walking efficiency. So the posterior kinetic chain is what allows us to kind of move our body weight forward. So when our foot is on the ground pushes up into our leg, and this is just a brief explanation, and our foot needs to be able to push back into the ground or resist that force of the ground coming up into the foot. And part of that chain is being able to extend that hip. Now, with that said, you might notice, or some ways that you might be able to tell that maybe you do have some weakness in your hips, are in your hip extensors, are one, that you kind of give, or the ground actually kind of pushes you up like an accordion. So what that usually looks like is someone's shoulders might drop, the opposite hip might drop, or you have this lurch to your walking. So in other words, instead of your body responding to the force of the ground by pushing back into the ground, you kind of use upper body momentum subconsciously. No one's doing this consciously, but you might use upper body momentum to move your body forward when you're standing on that leg. The other thing you might do is you might notice that you need your assistive device, your walker, or even a cane to kind of pull you forward. That when you don't have it, you feel like maybe you're back on your heels, or you feel like you just can't get your body forward when you are standing on the involved leg. So those are two of the biggest kind of movement signs that you might notice if that's weak. Some other things that you might notice that aren't related to movement necessarily is pain. Pain in the lower back muscles, because now when those hip muscles are meant to bring your hips forward, if they're not efficient, then sometimes, not in all cases, there's a lot of things that can potentially contribute to low back pain, but your back muscles actually are trying to help move you forward, or your hip is so far back that now your back muscles are just preventing you from falling. And so in those cases, if you notice you have low back pain, the first thing I would do is just have someone videotape you when you are walking to see if maybe that is the cause. Now, if you've been around for a while, you know that anytime I talk about culprits or potential movement problems that contribute to a bigger movement problem, I always mention like an abnormal synergy pattern. In this case, sometimes it's an involuntary flexing up. So if you have a flexor synergy pattern, when that foot pushes into, that ground pushes into your foot, instead of your body pushing back into the ground, some of you, if you've had damage to your brain, might actually flex up. And in that case, some of the exercises we go over today may be beneficial. So, just to review, a quick synopsis of everything I just went through. You know you might have some weakness in your hip extensors if you feel like your bottoms are always staying behind you, or you just feel like you can't bring your body forward, or that hips popped out to the side. The benefits of strengthening those hip muscles is that being able to push back into the ground or engage that posterior kinetic chain will make your walking more efficient and potentially decrease any discomfort you might be feeling in your lower back. Now, before we dive into the exercises, I also just want to add that there is a free gift that goes along with this video where you can receive a free PDF of a list of all the exercises in this video. So if you watch the video once and you think, yes, this is me, I need to start incorporating hip extension exercises into my routine, you can go to the description below, in the video description below this video, and click on the link and you will get that PDF delivered to your inbox. Also, you will notice there are chapters laid out in this video so that you can actually use this video as a reference. You have the list in the PDF, and then if you forget what an exercise looks like, you can just come back to this video in the future and just go to the exact chapter name that has that exact same exercise name in it. So I hope all of that made sense, but now let's go ahead and dive into the exercises. All right, now we're gonna start really easy. And I recommend that if any of you have any type of neurologic injury that caused damage to the parts of your brain that caused problems with one leg, that you do start as easy as possible. Now, this exercise is easy because you can really grade how much resistance you add compared to some of the ones that we're gonna do further down, where you do need to be able to kind of lift your body weight. But for this exercise, the focus really is you can keep your knee straight throughout the motion, especially for those of you that have some sort of like an abnormal synergy pattern. So let me show that to you again. You're just gonna squeeze your bottom and try and get that heel all the way to the mat. That's really important because you can see that's the actual position that your body is in when you're walking. Sometimes when I do this with people, I'll see them just kind of come to like this point, but you really wanna work that full range and get that foot all the way to the mat and then back up, bringing it all the way down. Now for this exercise, we're working hip extension because we really want to focus on that part of the walking pattern where you're having to push back into the ground. The goal for this one is really to try and keep your knees straight, since that is going to be the position that you're going to be in during that phase of the walking cycle. Let me show that to you again. So feet up on the gym ball, hands down for this one, and you're just going to lift your hips. Now again, this is okay, but getting fully straight is better, again, because this is really the position that you're going to be in when you're walking. So when you lift your hips, really try and get those hips all the way up. All right, so now this is hip extension against gravity. It's probably one of the hardest positions to actually get the hip extension motion, especially if you're someone, again, that's had damage to one of those areas of your brain that control leg movement. But definitely try it before you decide that you can't do it. You never know. Start working on it now. You might be able to do it sooner than you think. But again, the key to this one is that you keep your leg straight. So let me show that to you again. You're just going to lay on your stomach and you're just going to lift the leg. Because you're going from an extended hip position to almost a hyperextended position, that's kind of what makes this exercise so challenging, is it also requires good flexibility in your hip as well. So this is another hip extensor exercise. The benefit of this exercise versus laying on your stomach is that you can start with your leg in a little bit more of a hip flexed position. So it might be easier to do this position versus going all the way down to your stomach to start. Now the downside of this one is that if you have any arm involvement, some of you can't support your body weight on your arms. If that is the case, my suggestion is to just kind of bend over a chair or to put kind of your body half on a mat and half off of a mat and try doing it in that position. So again, that you can start in a little bit flexed with your hip in a little bit of a flexed position. But let me show that to you again. And again, we're really focused on keeping the knee straight for all the exercises that we're going to do today. Again, trying to focus on that posterior kinetic chain. So keeping that leg straight, leg lifts. All right, so for this exercise, we're just doing standing hip extension. Again, focused on having that knee straight. Attach the resistance band to a door, and then you're just going to bring that leg straight back. Now, one thing you want to try and avoid that I've seen is like just moving your body back. So you want your upper body to stay pretty still and make sure that movement is coming just at the leg so that you're really using those hip extensors to bring that leg back. Now for this exercise, what we're focused on is instead of the leg actually moving backwards, we're going to work the other side of the joint, still working the same muscles, and we're going to bend the upper body forward and then bring the upper body back into extension. So the key for this one is that you're bending at your hips. You want a little bit of a bend in your knees, but you still want your knees to be straight. And then you're going to stand back up. Bend at those hips. Try not to round those shoulders. So if you had a flashlight pointing out of your chest, try and have it shining a little bit out on the floor, maybe like 5 or 10 feet out on the floor, or even think about it shining on a wall directly in front of you, and then back up so that you're not going like this. Then you're not really getting the most out of this exercise as far as isolating those hip extensors. Down, back up, down, and back up. Now we're going to go through what I call like an RDL, which is a Russian deadlift kind of series or sequence of exercises you guys can do. For those of you that know what a single leg Russian deadlift is, it's pretty much this motion. Maybe some of you have seen people do that at the gym. That's a really great exercise to isolate the hip extensors, really in both legs, but primarily the leg that's on the ground. But it's a pretty hard exercise for a lot of people to do, especially if you have any kind of balance problems on that leg as well, like in addition to the weakness in the hip. So we're going to start by just staggering the feet. So this is the working leg. This is the leg we're focused on working. You definitely want to hold on to something for support or lean against a wall. Remember, this isn't a balance exercise. This is a strengthening exercise. So it's not cheating to hold on. I like the idea of leaning against a wall. Anytime you grab something, there's the risk or there's the tendency that you're going to use it a little bit to push yourself back up. Less of a tendency if you're just leaning into a wall, but yet you still get the benefit of feeling more stable. But what you're going to do is you're just going to put this back foot down, kind of like a kickstand, and you're going to just bend forward at your hip and come back up. Now you want a soft knee, but a straight knee. So you want a straight knee, but you don't want a locked out knee. Bend at that hip and back up. Bend at the hip and back up. Once you feel like you can get pretty good at that, you can try not holding on to anything and try and slide your fingertips down towards your knee and come back up. Slide those fingertips down towards your knee and come back up. Now from there, what you can do is you can actually try and lift the back leg. So lift the back leg and slide those fingertips down to your knee and back up. Again, slide those fingertips down to your knee and back up. Slide them down and back up. And then once you feel like you mastered that, now you can try and start adding a weight and same thing. Bending at the hip again and trying to lift that back leg up and then come back up. Now, the key to this one, you might need to videotape yourself doing this or do it in front of a mirror, is that you want to keep your body as straight as possible. So the same rate that you're bending forward, you want to be lifting that back leg. So a lot of times what I see is this. And if you're having trouble with it, then I would just go back to not using a weight, because I think there's some value in being able to hold that body in this straight position as you lean forward. So again, try as a challenge to lift your back leg at the same rate that you are dropping your chest down, so that you kind of keep that body in a straight line. And again, very important to reiterate, leg is straight but not locked out. And then for this last exercise, you guys have seen me do this in other videos, but it's a great exercise, so I was like showing it. Having a resistance band, pulling those hips backwards. Remember what I said, one way to identify that those muscles are weak is that you're not getting your hips forward. So having that resistance band actually pulling you backwards and you having to fight against it, and then just doing a step up with your opposite leg. And again, you want to think about kind of driving this leg like into the ground. Like if you think about your leg is pushing up and you're trying to kind of push that ground away. Like you fight against that ground. You don't want that ground pushing your leg up and creating that accordion effect. So you want to kind of push that leg into the ground, almost fight against the ground and step that leg forward. Push into the ground and step that other leg forward. Push into the ground and step that opposite leg forward. And then that is it for this video. I hope you guys found that video helpful. As I mentioned at the beginning, if you want a PDF list of all of the exercises, click on the link in the description below this video and you will get that delivered immediately to your email inbox. If you want to go a little bit deeper and join our Inner Circle community, you can become a gold member. Link for that is also in the description below. With your membership, you get access to our Discord channel. You get access to our monthly lives where you can submit questions in advance and I answer your specific questions, as well as access to our growing home exercise library that has exercises specific to movement retraining for neurologic conditions. So to learn more about that, click on the link in the description below. And as usual, if you're new to this channel and you haven't yet subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so that you will get notified every time I upload new videos. I enjoyed spending time with you all today, and I will see you in the next video. Have a good day.